Hello, welcome to today's virtual celebration of BISG's 2020 award honorees. I'm Andrew Savickas, chair of BISG's board of directors. While we all would have preferred to recognize David Cully, Janet McCarthy Grimm, and Rachel Comerford in person, we're still glad to have an occasion to highlight their significant contributions to the book publishing industry. BISG created these awards almost a decade ago as a way to spotlight service, advocacy, and innovation across the book industry supply chain. We believe that our industry's infrastructure depended on the work of a dedicated group of people, often working in the background, who saw challenges and solved them, and saw opportunities and capitalized on them. We still believe that, particularly at this moment, in a year when the very term supply chain moved from a dark art to the thing that we all need to get everything from toilet paper and hand sanitizer to mail and, of course, books, our work feels even more important in the age of COVID-19, and its implications have never been more visible. We're glad to have you with us today to celebrate David, Janet, and Rachel, and to spend some time shining a spotlight on things that are genuinely good about book publishing. We appreciate the significant support we've received from Bowker, whose sponsorship made it possible to bring the virtual annual meeting to the full publishing community. Thank you for being part of today's celebration. Now I'll turn it over to Brian O'Leary, BISG's Executive Director.
Thank you, Andrew. We'd like to start actually with the Sally Dedecker Award for Lifetime Service. The award itself is named for one of BISG's longtime volunteers and advocates known to many folks. She passed away just a couple of years ago. But the Sally Dedecker Award for Lifetime Service recognizes the tireless and persistent efforts, often unseen, of an individual working on behalf of the book industry. This year, we're happy to be able to recognize David Cully, of formerly Baker & Taylor. And to introduce him, I'd like to invite Joe Ganella, Aman Kochar, and Oren Teicher to turn the cameras on, unmute themselves, and I think, David, if you could join them on the video, that would be great. Joe, why don't you lead us off?
Great, thank you. Many of us are privileged to receive your daily gratitude email, and I'm going to borrow that form for your introduction today. I am grateful to you for the years in the early 80s when I worked, along with many others, under your leadership, when you were General Merchandise Manager at the then burgeoning Walden Books. I am grateful to you, Harry Hoffman and Bon Fred, for launching the first point-of-purchase retail book club for romance readers. After you left for your adventures at Simon & Schuster, the team at Walden Books extended that innovative concept to include science fiction and fantasy readers, and then mystery and suspense readers. I am grateful to you for your mentorship, when at Harry's request, we were asked to negotiate publishing or purchase terms from the publishing community for the first retail distribution center. I am grateful to you and Harry for introducing me at that time to Tom Clarkson, who gently explained to all of us that if we wanted a cost-effective result from that facility, we had to lay track in the industry before we could run the supply chain train to everyone's benefit. I am grateful to you for not firing me that weekend when you gave me the tiller of your sailboat in Long Island Sound and I almost capsized us. I am grateful for your hiring me as VP General Merchandise Manager at Supermart, a book distributor to supermarkets and mass merchants owned by a man named Len Riggio, who had named you as president of that subsidiary. I am grateful to you for promoting me to VP General Manager when Len asked you to become GMM of Barnes & Noble B. Dalton. Even as you assumed that responsibility, you continued my lessons in negotiation as we navigated contracts for book departments with entities like Stop & Shop, Pathmark, and Bradley's together. I'm grateful to you for bringing Tom Clarkson onto the Barnes & Noble team so we could repeat the process of setting up a warehouse network that by this time needed to support both the bricks and mortar channel and the booming online business at bn.com. I'm grateful to you, David, for your partnership for all those years after you left B&N and led Baker & Taylor's retail division. And lastly, I am most grateful to you for the years of friendship we have enjoyed. I am grateful for the friendship between our families. I am grateful for the 40 years of weddings, celebrations, and annual Christmas parties where you perform your prestidigitation and I, at your command, recite the annual Christmas poem. Congratulations on this well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award, David. I love you. We love you.
Thank you, Joe.
Aman, perhaps we could hear from you.
Yes, David, it's good to see you. I was struggling to figure out what to say today because 5 minutes is just not enough. But I want to focus on two themes. I want to focus on what I've learned from you and hopefully what you've taught the world: grit and empathy. I want to thank you for teaching me grit. And as I learned from you, to be gritty is to keep putting one foot in front of the other. To be gritty is to hold fast to an interesting and purposeful goal. To be gritty is to invest day after week, year after year in challenging practice. To be gritty is to fall down 7 times and rise the 8th. While I borrow these words from Angela Duckworth, I want to thank you for practicing grit all day, every day, for what I've known you, personally and professionally. Empathy. The lowest form of human understanding, according to me, is listening. It's very difficult for some people, but it's the lowest form. I think what you specialized in and what you've taught me, and hopefully many others, is how to empathize, how to live in another's world, how to know what I've struggled with personally, how to make my struggles your own, spare a thought, and reflect upon that in our conversations. The most beautiful people that we come to know are those who've known defeat, who've known suffering, who've known struggle, who've known loss, and still found their way out of those depths. I've come to appreciate your resilience. These people have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen, David, and you are a beautiful person. Lastly, to conclude, from a personal favorite of mine to yours, as Dr. Seuss said, oh, the places you'll go. There is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. And the magical things you can do with that ball will make you the winningest winner of all. I want to tell you, David, you are a winner. And thank you for passing all your wisdom, grit, and empathy to the people that have come to know you. Thank you. And I'm so proud to be a part of this panel that can introduce the Sally Dedecker Lifetime Service Award for you. Thank you for being in my life and all of ours.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you.
And Oren, you definitely wanted to be here today, so why don't we turn to you to say a few words about David?
Well, first of all, Brian, let me thank you for including me in this program. I had so looked forward to seeing you and my good BISG friends in New York City this past April. And like all of us, was disappointed, though obviously understood why that event had to be canceled. But I could not be more delighted that it is happening today, albeit a bit differently than many of us ever could have imagined. So thank you, Brian, for including me in this and for all that you and BISG do to build a better and stronger book business. It is an honor and a privilege to say a few words about David Cully. In what seems like a lifetime ago, I was first aware of David when our respective organizations were on opposite sides of a rather combative bit of litigation. We got to know each other, of course, a bit later when David went to Baker and Taylor. And for all those years at B&T, we forged what was perhaps an unlikely partnership that in the end, I honestly believe helped grow our respective businesses and at the same time put more books in the hands of more readers. David's mantra always that he was willing to try new things and to innovate and expand our business. And while everything he did not succeed, there isn't an iota of doubt that many things that he did were major and critically important breakthroughs and helped contribute to a far stronger and healthier book business. Looking back now, I can say without any qualification at all that many of those things were indispensable to the renaissance and growth of the indie bookstores this past decade. From support for ABA's educational programming, through the growth and development of third-party replenishment, and a myriad other initiatives in between. David Cully was never, ever afraid to experiment with new ideas and new approaches. Whether it was in London and Frankfurt, on the floor of the Javits Center, or in Bridgewater, Charlotte, or in White Plains, I always look forward to our encounters, as inevitably David had some new idea, some new experiment, something that he wanted to try. As everyone in this audience knows, the book business is made up of some really remarkable people, of which David Cully is one. I was privileged to have had the chance to work with him and watch him work his magic. Our business is better today because of David. So it couldn't be more appropriate that the Book Industry Study Group is presenting him with the Sally Dedecker Lifetime Achievement Award. Knowing Sally as I did, no one is more deserving of this recognition than David. Congratulations, David.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you.
David, I imagine you have a few words that you'd like to share with the audience on receiving this award.
Yeah, I'm going to hold up the award for 1 second. It's tough to see on the screen, but I'm really humbled, and I'm Joe and Aman and Oren. Thank you for your kind words. I was reflecting on what I might want to share today, and I joined this industry in 1977. So it's been about 42 years. And along the way, I met some remarkable people, some people that I'd like to recognize today. I had a lot of mentors in this industry, a lot of people that I learned from, some of whom you're going to recognize and others that you won't. But in the 5 or so minutes that I have, I'd like to really call out some individuals that were remarkable in my tenure. The first, not a company that I worked for, was the Ingram Book Company, but I worked with them intimately. A gentleman there that you know by the name of Harry Hoffman in the 1970s did one of his revolutionary things and brought the microfiche reader to the book industry. He catapulted Ingram from a sleepy little company to an industry leader. Also at Ingram, and a mentor of mine, a fellow named Lee Sinnott, I called him the Silver Fox. He was sneaky smart. He was a mentor and a partner. And during my time at Barnes & Noble, there was 1 year where the Ingram Book Company facilitated the opening of 100 superstores, generating about $300 million worth of business for that company. Another stop along the way was Berkeley Putnam. I'd like to call out one individual you may not know. His name is Carolyn Nichols. I came to her and said, we need to do something along the lines of Silhouette and Harlequin, and she came up with this idea of Second Chance at Love, and it was a major success. And also an individual you know there, David Shanks, went on to become the CEO of Penguin. David was an avid reader, and he read a book from Naval Institute Press by a guy named Tom Clancy, and he said, I gotta have this guy. And David was instrumental in bringing him to Putnam. Back along my journey was Walden Books, where I spent actually 2 times at Walden Books, but Harry Hoffman, as Joe alluded to, revolutionized the book industry again when he talked about having a retail distribution center. And Joe was instrumental in making that a reality. Also at the Walden Book Company, somebody you don't know, Russ Boletto, who was an IT guy who was instrumental in making sure that there were barcodes and POS readable barcodes on books throughout the industry. I spent some time at Simon & Schuster. One of my colleagues there who I hired at Walden Books and then I hired at Simon & Schuster, his name is Michael Selleck, who proved that kindness and tough-mindedness could indeed go together at Simon & Schuster. Somebody you may remember is Julia Knickerbocker. She was the queen of PR in the 1980s, a mentor to many who went on to be PR leaders throughout this industry. Then I spent some time, about a decade, at Barnes & Noble. Some of these individuals you recognize, some of them you won't. The first is Chris Troya. He was an IT guy who was instrumental in making sure that the systems that we had could scale as we opened up hundreds of superstores and launched barnesandnoble.com. Another gentleman you may recognize, his name is Steve Reggio. The way I think of him, he was the Uber merchant of our industry, our answer to Sam Walton and Joseph Bloomingdale. Antoinette Ercolano. If Steve was the architect of the Barnes & Noble superstores, Antoinette was the engineer in terms of merchandising, design, and layout. Baker and Taylor. Bud Baker was instrumental in the ISBN standard and POS standards that led to the development of the book industry group. Connie Harbison was instrumental in the development of subject codes for the book industry study group. Gene Cernez taught me and so many others about the nuances and power of the public library business. Sam Dempsey was instrumental in further defining metadata standards. Sid Stanley was a public librarian who turned publishing executive at AMS and BTMS and developed a $100 million publishing business in a very short period of time. And George Coe, who was the architect of custom library systems, allowing librarians and patrons to focus on community outreach. Finally, at Follett, a woman named Jennifer Hatton, who started as a college store manager and now heads Follett's course materials and publisher relations for the higher education group, and Tony Hopkins, who was a prime mover in Follett's entry into the school book fair business. Last but not least, an individual whose career stops included Ingram, Walden Books, and Barnes & Noble, and others, present at the creation of so many technical innovations in our industry, an advocate, an engineer, and a superb project manager, always content to work behind the scenes, a master of phasing things in, another mentor of mine, Tom Clarkson. So that's it in 5 minutes or so. I thank you once again. I'm humbled by this award, your acknowledgement of my contributions, and my uncanny ability to be at the right place in the right time, surrounded by great people. Thank you. I'm truly humbled by this award.
Well, thank you. And I think if we can join in a little bit of applause for David. I think there are many other people behind the scenes who are muted now who would say the same. And I would say to you and to your colleagues at Baker and Taylor that it plays a critical role today and continues to. People like Connie Harbison, Sam Dempsey, who served on our board until the middle of this last year, and as well the Claire Holloway now chairing our metadata committee, are critical to doing the work that we do and the way that we do it. So congratulations, and if I might, if you're able to stay, we'd like to bring you back after recognizing two other folks to have a single moment with the three of you on screen.
Sure.
All right, thank you. If I could ask you or invite you to each to mute yourself and turn your camera off, and at the same time ask Janet McCarthy Grimm to turn her camera on and her sound as well.
Hopefully it's on.
It is. Thank you, Janet. I really appreciate it. So our next award is the Industry Champion Award. And that's given to an individual whose efforts have gone beyond the requirements of her position to advance the publishing industry while embracing our mission to facilitate innovation and shared solutions for the benefit of companies and practitioners, anyone who creates, produces, and distributes published content. And our recipient this year, happily, is Janet McCarthy Grimm. And I actually took over. I didn't give Janet any leeway in choosing who would introduce her because I really wanted to do it. If you know me, you probably realize that I don't get overjoyed very often. I'm Irish, but I am definitely not the happy-go-lucky Irish. I always feel that there's another shoe out there to drop. But when the BISG board selected Janet McCarthy Grimm as the recipient of our 2020 Industry Champion Award, I was truly overjoyed. Janet is one of my favorite people, and she's shaped much of what we've tried to do over the almost 4 years that I've been at BISG. And I'd like to tell you how that happened. We met about five years ago. And when we were both serving on a BISG board that was much larger than what we have today. It had about 36 members. That made it hard to get to know one another, even across meetings that ran as much as 3 hours. So it wasn't really until late in 2016, shortly after I took on this role, that Janet and I found ourselves in a much smaller meeting of industry association that was hosted by the AAP and organized by Orrin Teicher, who was then CEO of the American Booksellers Association. So Janet was there representing the Book Manufacturers Institute, where she was a board member. The executive director of the organization at the time was unable to come to New York for the meeting, and Janet wanted to make sure that the organization, which she referred to as her organization, had a seat at the table. So we were at a break, and I said it was nice to see her outside of BISG, and I teased her a bit, asking, how many boards do you sit on? And Janet looked at me at the way that Janet looks at people who, when she has a point to make, direct, really wide-eyed, and very deliberately. And she said, you do not want to know the answer to that question. But I did want to know. And a couple of months later, we had the first of what became somewhere between occasional and regular series of lunches. And at this one, Janet told me about her work with BMI, with her work with the Book Industry Guild of New York, her work with the Poets and Writers, and more. I talked about my enthusiasm for Orrin's meeting in New York, and Janet said to me, you should do something like that at BISG. And I have to tell you, the way she said it, it wasn't really a suggestion. So that was the start, actually, of what we now call the Association Advisory Council. It's an association that BISG hosts or moderates of book publishing associations. And this summer, a subset of that group launched a healthcare initiative that we hope will better serve authors, smaller and medium-sized publishers, booksellers, and others. You know, good ideas have probably 100 or even 1,000 different authors, and Janet would never claim credit for any of it. But her deliberate push to create this group 3.5 years ago established the foundation that we needed to do good things in our industry. Honestly, I can't imagine anyone working harder than Janet to spread information across our industry. Her updates on the paper market became a staple for our webinar series, and there was no aspect of the paper part of our business that ever escaped her notice. She'd talk about mills that I'd never heard of as if I'd had, and the next time I spoke with her, I'd done the research and actually knew what she was talking about. Now, as you heard a few minutes ago, the Industry Champion Award recognizes the efforts of someone who's gone beyond the requirements of her position to advance the publishing industry. At BISG, we're fortunate to count many members who qualify for that honor. Recent award nominees include Angela Bowl, who's a former BISG staff member, who now oversees the IBPA and not coincidentally leads that association advisory council. Dave Kramer, who's leading digital book efforts at Hachette Book Group while simultaneously contributing significant work to the W3C in their oversight of EPUB 3. And most recently, Robin Seaman, who in her time at Benetech relentlessly pursued projects to make content more accessible to all. In her or his own way, each of these people is a connector, bringing together people, ideas, and opportunities. I think Janet joins them as perhaps the consummate connector. Almost every time we talk, she asks me, do you know? Through her, we've been introduced to people that had maybe never heard of BISG, who didn't know that there was an organization working on the problems that they faced. We've been introduced to organizations like BMI that expand what we know, and folks at BIGNY, the Book Industry Guild in New York, who are eager to collaborate on topics like manufacturing capacity. That's actually something that I wished I'd pushed harder when we had the chance last year. Janet hosted our first gathering of that group at Lindenmeyr's New York offices, and I thought we'd have the time to do it again with her. But Janet decided to retire from her role at Lindenmeyr as Vice President of Sales at the end of 2019. But true to form, her volunteer efforts have continued unabated. I know that she won't stop. Janet loves book publishing in pretty much all its forms, and that love abides, and we're the better for it. While I'm sure that Janet's involvement will continue, it's never too soon to recognize the contributions of someone whose work has really shaped book publishing. So to Janet McCarthy Grimm, a true champion of book publishing, I'm pleased to present BISG's 2020 Industry Champion Award.
Thank you, Brian. That was an amazing introduction, and I'm so delighted it was you that was delivering it. I'm supposed to show you the award, which it says it's very hard to see because it's glass. And I'd love to say how pleased I am to receive this award. It is a tremendous honor to be recognized by people in this industry that is so very special to me. And I can't thank you enough for it. I do want to say that one of the reasons that I have been successful in being a connector, as you call me, Brian, is because the company that I worked for, Lindenmeyr Book Publishing Papers, really did want their employees to participate in industry organizations. Our company philosophy is that the more you get involved with different groups and in different organizations, the more you're going to get out of your career and the more you're going to be able to help your customer base and your supply base by understanding more aspects of our industry. And I think that understanding is critical to sharing information with other people. I was very fortunate in the course of my career to have worked with two amazing bosses. First, Bob Severud, who was my boss for 18 years, and then Bob McBride, who was followed Bob Severud. And they were tremendous champions of their employees and of the book business, and they really helped people in our company to look beyond our company boundaries and form new ideas and new allegiances. I think that the book industry in general is very fortunate to have a variety of different organizations. And as Brian mentioned, the Book Industry Guild of New York, the newly launched New York Book Forum, Poets and Writers, all of which I'm still very involved in, the Book Manufacturers Institute. One of the things that we have really done in the last 5 years is recognize that we're not operating in a vacuum. We all need each other to really be effective. And that's why I'm so excited that the Book Industry Study Group, which is the only group that goes across the entire supply chain channels, has sponsored the Book Association Advisory Council, because the Book Industry Study Group understands that all of these organizations are interrelated. And the more we understand about each aspect of those organizations, the more we're going to be able to connect with one another and to help keep our industry strong and thriving. I was fortunate while I was at Lindenmeyr to have an amazing set of colleagues. I was fortunate as the Vice President of Sales to work with a tremendous set of sales representatives who spread a lot of knowledge and understanding across the industry with me. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Marie Mulcahy, Rick Hoffman, Steve True, and Mike Rice for their relentless efforts to represent not just Lindenmeyr, but the book publishing paper world. So in closing, I want to say that one of the things that I've learned over the course of my career, and those of you who haven't finished your careers yet, you might want to take this to heart. The more you put into any organization, the more you put into any effort, the more you're going to get out of it. And so when people are starting out new jobs in a new industry, I urge them to find the association that speaks to them in their industry and volunteer. And from that volunteering position, you can grow into a place where you can actually help others who are coming into that organization and help others that are coming into the industry. And every time I do help somebody get their first job in the book publishing industry, I make them promise me that they will help somebody else 10 years down the road, or 15 years down the road, or 20 years down the road, when they need to be nurturing and sponsoring new people coming into the industry. So thank you, Brian. I'm tremendously pleased with this award, and couldn't be happier to be in the company of the other recipients, and congratulations to the other recipients receiving awards today. Thank you.
Okay, well, you get a little bit of applause for me. Congratulations, and I think a lot of people in the background. And I think your words resonate to me as well. Thank you, appreciate it. And we're going to invite you back in a few minutes to just be on screen for a moment for a single picture. If I could invite Dave Kramer and Rachel Comerford to turn their videos on and unmute themselves. Thank you. So I'm just going to explain the Industry Innovator Award. It was created to salute either a company or an individual who boldly reimagines what publishing is and can be. In this case, we're recognizing Rachel Comerford of Macmillan Learning for the work that she and her department have done to create truly accessible workflows for book publishing materials for an educational audience. Dave, I'd like to invite you to introduce Rachel in all of her glory. Rachel, I want to let you know that Elise is watching, so
Thank you.
The other Comerford.
Okay. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away called Philadelphia, there was a strange ritual called a conference. It sounds crazy to modern humans, but hundreds of people would travel by plane, train, or bus and gather in the same room without masks to talk about publishing, learning, and accessibility. The conference was called Content in Context, a name which is remarkable for being both confusing and ungoogleable. It was organized by a publishing trade organization vastly inferior to BISG and was about educational publishing. My limited experience in that sector left me traumatized and confused, but my BISG award-winning friend Svea Siegman dragged me along because ebooks or something. That was the day I met Rachel Comerford. Was she on a panel with us? I don't even remember. I do remember taking the train from Philly back to New York City, and Rachel glommed onto us. That was 4 years ago, and she's still there. This is important. Rachel does something called friendship assault. She identifies someone she wants to be friends with and then makes it happen. The target doesn't really have a choice when faced with Rachel's determination and iron will. Being friendship assaulted by Rachel is such an experience that my company published a children's book about it called, of course, You Will Be My Friend. It's a lovely book. Please buy lots of copies. Rachel will not be denied. That's how she changed publishing and education. That iron will and determination moved Macmillan from inaccessible PDFs to accessible EPUBs. Her strong sense of justice led her to share everything she's learned about accessibility, from speaking at conferences to writing blog posts and documentation. Her keen intellect helped bring some much needed sanity to publishing standards. Seeing Rachel about to ask a question is both terrifying and exhilarating. You know the question will be deep and insightful and that it will challenge everybody's assumptions. She went from English major and publisher sales rep to being an expert on the accessibility of digital learning platforms because she's super smart and really cares about people, all people. So what exactly did Rachel and her team, the Rachelettes, do? Macmillan's ebooks are now global certified accessible by Benetech, but in that simple statement is a vast amount of work. It's not just understanding and implementing the web content accessibility guidelines for incredibly complicated textbooks, which in itself is a massive project which involves a lot of nuanced thinking. It's not just understanding and implementing the EPUB accessibility standards. It's not just getting offshore vendors to understand and implement accessibility. It's not just getting the platforms that present the EPUB to the students to be accessible. It's not just convincing senior management, it's not just managing senior management while accomplishing all of the above. So what's the hard part? It's convincing the only people in the universe who seem more change resistant than production editors who've had the same job for 45 years and think the ballpoint pen is a radical technology. I'm talking about university student disability offices who are like the seagulls in Finding Nemo that can only say one word. Instead of mine, they say PDF, PDF, PDF. Convincing these people to actually use beautifully accessible EPUB instead of largely inaccessible PDF, that's the hard part. How Rachel did that, I have no idea, although I suspect it involved both profanity and swordplay. It is my profound honor and great pleasure to introduce Rachel Comerford, the winner of the Book Industry Study Group's Industry Innovator Award.
Thank you, Dave. When Brian first told me about this, I joked with him that the only awards that I accept come with tiaras, and Brian, in an abundance of generosity and sincerity, provided me with one. And so I'm honored to accept this award, but I'm also honored to accept it in style. The first time that I saw Dave Creamer present at a conference, I have known since then never to follow speaking him publicly, and only Brian O'Leary could make me break that rule. I had kind of hoped it would be for a Lifetime Achievement Award because I want to finally retire after aging 40 years in the last 6 months, but apparently figurative age means nothing in this business, and have to go with actual chronological. Seriously. Crown removed. Being recognized as an industry innovator is very flattering, and it's especially when I'm surrounded by so many incredible thinkers every day. When I first entered this industry, I was an English major. I was fresh out of school, and I had a passable knowledge of Quark and an incredible amount of student debt, and both of those things are still true. It was always said as a joke when I started, and and like many jokes, there was a lot of truth behind it, that publishing is traditionally 10 years behind technological advances. Now we're an industry learning to move from proud Luddites to curious innovators. What makes me the most proud of publishing innovation is to use it as a tool to fight exclusivity. We use it to make educational material accessible to all users, to make sure that no one has to wait to get access to their school supplies, and that those materials reflect our diverse world. It's our responsibility to innovate for good, and the opportunities to do so are endless. I feel incredibly lucky to be a part of that movement and to be a part of the impact that it's had on publishing and on education culture in general. I feel lucky to have worked with so many dedicated and determined partners as we get better and better at what we do. And I am so excited to honor future innovators as they improve on what we've done so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. And if I can ask you to hold on, and Dave, if you would mute yourself and turn your video off. And I'd like to invite back David Cully to turn on video, as well as Janet McCarthy Grimm. And if you just take a moment to take your awards and hold them up a little bit. I recognize that they're not the most visible. Clear is probably not the right place to start for a video presentation. You're good, Janet. Perfect, Rachel. That might help. Thank you very much. And to each of you and all of you, congratulations and thank you for being part of our recognition this year. We really appreciate it. We think you're very deserving for the awards that you've been given, but it's also a reflection of our thanks for the work that you've done to support BISG and cross industry collaboration over the last several years. Thank you, appreciate it. With that, I'd like to turn things back to Andrew Savickas. Janet, you'll probably be happy to know that you can turn your camera off now. This is not Janet's favorite medium. And Rachel as well. Thanks, Sen.
All right, thank you, Brian. And a sincere congratulations to David, Janet, and Rachel on their awards. It is a real privilege to participate in this chance to recognize three professionals who truly exemplify the spirit of cooperation, collaboration, and innovation that drives BISG. So thank you very much for sharing your stories and sharing your energy and helping us share this opportunity to recognize you. A recording of today's celebration will be posted on the BISG website, and next week's BISG email will lead with a post on all three of today's honorees. This is the 6th of 7 sessions in our virtual annual meeting. The last one, which is a keynote conversation with Barnes & Noble CEO James Daunt, is just a bit more than an hour away. If you've not registered for that event, there is still time. Check out the events tab on the BISG homepage. And for those of you that have registered already, we look forward to seeing you there as well. So again, thank you very much, and congratulations again to David, Janet, and Rachel for your contributions to the industry and your willingness to share them with us here today. Thank you.